I'm gonna give you my top 4 lower body strength exercises for linemen in American football, and we're gonna start right now. What's up, everybody? It's Dane Miller from GarageStrength.com, and if this is your first time to the channel and you're interested in becoming a better athlete, you wanna get more explosive, you wanna dominate down in the trenches, make sure that you like, you subscribe, and you smash that notification bell so we can help you become a beast. Now, one of the biggest failures that I see in American football, one of the biggest failures that I see with offensive linemen is they're doing these quarter squats and they think that's gonna help their line play. They're doing these power cleans where they starfish and they almost blow out their back catching with their hips really forward. They're doing these movements almost half-assed. They're not executing these exercises properly. And what ends up happening is it doesn't actually transfer over to the field. So we've got to think about, especially at the high school level, we have bigger dudes, we have bigger men playing football. They have struggles, they have problems with full range of motions. They're typically a little bit weaker down in the hole. And what does that mean for field play? If we want to dominate on the football field, we've got to play with lower shoulder pads, okay? We got to play with lower pads. And our hip level has to be deeper. If our hip level is deep, but we don't have strength in that position, we're going to get owned, okay? So we've got to think about that. Think about Von Miller coming off the edge. He's got incredible ankle mobility, hip mobility, knee mobility, lower back mobility. He can dip, he can get under the shoulder pads, and he can make better plays. Think about Joe Thomas, one of the greatest offensive linemen of all time. He could get extremely deep by planting that anchor, lowering the knee, lowering his hip level, and then playing with lower pads so he could pick up any of those speed rushers coming off the edge. Someone like Dwight Freeney, who is one of the greatest of all time, he's one of the few guys that could actually control Joe, and the reason being is that Dwight Freeney could play a little bit lower than Joe could. He's shorter, but he also had lower pad level because of his hip mobility, because of his strength, because of his speed. So we've got to think about, when we're talking about lower body strength exercises, we have to train that. We have to train those key elements behind line play. And that's going to take us into that number 4 exercise that's going to improve our lower body strength with line play. That's going to be a pause back squat. And I can hear all the grumbling now. I can hear all the football coaches. They've got their whistles. They're sitting there. They're ready to coach. They're blowing their whistle in their gym, and they want all their guys to do box squats. They're doing box squats to 90 degrees. You know, they're doing low bar box squats, squatting like this. Their knees are never actually flexing, and then they wonder why they get owned in the trenches. I want our linemen to go nice and deep, and they could start light. You could start at 135 pounds, 185 pounds, and slowly build up that strength. I want them to get nice and deep so they can improve their ankle mobility, they can improve their knee flexion, they can improve their hip mobility, they can improve their lower back mobility, they're gonna improve their dynamic trunk control. So we're gonna get nice and deep, and we're gonna go 1, 2, go. Fast out of the hole. Fast out of a very deep position is going to transfer to a lineman who's in a 3-point. If they're in a 3-point, they have serious dorsiflexion in their ankle. They have seriously steep shin angles for the knee flexion. So we've got to train that nice and deep position so then it transfers over to the field. So do this twice a week. You go really light one day, you can go a little bit heavier, try and push that weight a little bit more so you can increase that strength. But this helps improve hip mobility and power from that deep position to help keep those pads nice and low. Okay, that number 3 exercise that now we're gonna work into, this is going to be from a unilateral perspective. This is a movement that I believe a lot of football coaches do utilize, but they don't use it the right way, okay? They sort of just throw it randomly into their conditioning and they don't actually use it to improve strength, to improve that power output. And that is sled pushes. And the reason why I wanna use sled pushes as an example is because it helps with that unilateral cycling. It helps with running. It helps with producing a ton of power in a unilateral perspective. That's the key concept here with linemen, offensive and defensive, is that we have an object in front of us. So if I'm a D end or I'm a D tackle, coming off the line, I'm in a unilateral perspective and I'm gonna post up. I'm gonna post up on one of my offensive guys, a guard, a center, whoever it might be. So I'm in a unilateral position and I'm applying a ton of force to try and manipulate them so that I can get to my proper gap. This is where we've got to think about sled pushes, okay? So a sled push, we want to hit that nice and long with our arms, just like we want to post up on somebody and still be able to apply a ton of force forward. So if we're running, if we're pulling, if we're coming off the line as a defensive guy, we want to post up on somebody so that we can see where the ball is. That's where we use sled pushes. We can use sled pushes where we want to stay nice and deep. We want to see that positive shin angle. We want to see hip extension and even extension in our upper back so that we're driving on the sled and it can be really, really heavy. We have to remember that when we're playing other guys, these guys are going to be heavy to begin with, and then they're going to be applying force back into us. So we want to do heavy sled pushes, heavy sled pushes. And then we can even later on in the week, if we have a game in 2 days, we can do 3 or 4 sets of lighter sled pushes just to work on that speed on the cycling. But one of the problems that I see is that a lot of coaches will do this like real short, choppy pushing when they do the sled. I want to see a long drive, a very long drive that engages the quads and the glutes. That's going to help us run faster. Utilize that short, choppy step if you think that's effective for technique out on the field. Utilize that when you're training out on the field doing your technical work. When we're doing our strength work, I want to see plantar flexion. I don't want to see that heel dropping on the sled push. I don't want to see any heel dropping. That heel has to stay high. I want the knee forward. I want forward chest lean. I want that steep shin angle. That's going to help transfer to good speed, a good drive, faster off the ball, and good contact when we're making that first step. And that's going to help you dominate in the trenches. Now that's going to take us into that second key exercise. And now we're going to be focusing on even more unilateral work. We want to focus on hip mobility, hip flexion, upright trunk, so that we can actually make good plays. If we're leaning too much when we're coming off the line, someone can dump us, okay? Someone's gonna even be able to rip us or swim us a lot easier, right? So we wanna see a dumbbell split squat. And I prefer doing this from an elevated position because it's gonna force us to get a little bit deeper. So we can hold dumbbells upright. We're gonna keep that trunk nice and upright, nice and rigid. We don't wanna be leaning too much, and we want that back knee to drop between the two positions that we're holding. Front foot, back foot. Both of these positions can be elevated, and we wanna drop that back knee down to a pad. Okay, so we're gonna stay nice and upright, drop that back knee down to a pad, and get nice and mobile. That's gonna help open up our hips. A lot of younger offensive linemen will struggle to do this. They'll plop, they'll collapse right away. They'll start to complain that their hip is pulling, that something's pulling in their quad. Some people, when they first do a deficit split squat, it's even gonna pull on their knee a little bit because their quads are so tight and their hips are so tight. So if we can hit a nice deep position and open up those hips, open up, lengthen that quad, and even keep that more upright posture, that upright torso, we're gonna have improved mobility, we're gonna have a more rigid trunk when we're playing, and we're gonna be able to lower our pad level while we're still in a better position, and that's gonna help us to compromise our opponents. Okay, so that's what we gotta think about. When we're training all this lower body strengthening movements for linemen, we've got to think about how can we utilize this stuff to take advantage of our opponents. So deficit split squats, up on elevated positions, holding dumbbells deep. I recommend 7 to 9 reps on each leg. This is going to help with overall speed. It's going to help with improving structural integrity. It's not an extremely challenging exercise, but go into it slowly. See how it feels the first couple of times that you're doing it, and then start to overload it with some dumbbells. And then over time, you're gonna be able to do this with a barbell on your back, and it's gonna drastically improve your unilateral strength and that dynamic trunk control. And then that's gonna take us into the number one exercise that I love to utilize with all of my linemen. It's gonna be sort of like a little bonus where you actually get 2 exercises. Coaches, American football coaches, love to do hangs. They'll do these hang cleans and they'll sort of starfish back and forth. They don't wanna snatch. They don't wanna do anything like that. They don't wanna do snatches. They don't wanna do hang, or they don't wanna do proper clean technique. So what ends up being a problem is that they might hurt their lower back. They actually don't have mobility to catch a clean deep in the hole. They'll catch cleans like this with straps on, all this craziness. So that's why I'm going into a pause below the knee power snatch or a pause below the knee snatch. Let's make our linemen more athletic. Let's help our linemen learn how to recruit rapidly and absorb force quickly. This is why I want to use a power snatch or a full snatch pausing below the knee. So I want to see starting in a full snatch position, a position off the floor. The reason why I want my football linemen pulling off the floor is watch a lineman get into a 3-point stance. When they get into a 3-point stance, the hip angle, the knee angle, the ankle angles are almost identical to pulling off the floor. So why don't we train linemen in that position? What I want to do now is we're going to pull about 4 to 5 inches and we're going to pause. 1, 2, 3. And now if we want to use auditory cues, we can use auditory cues. We can have a go, We can have a QB saying snap or hike or whatever, we go, whatever. Now we can pause there, one, to strengthen their posterior chain, strengthen their lower back, strengthen their hips. And then as they come past the knee, make contact, and then we can catch with that chest coming forward. I believe full cleans, full snatches should be executed by every single lineman. It's going to teach you how to absorb energy in the deep position. It can help teach you how to absorb energy from a power position. So if we're doing this little bonus here, if it's a clean, we can pause below the knee. It's similar to a hang, but it's going to strengthen our lower back even more. If we do a full clean or a full snatch, or a power clean or a power snatch, it still is going to teach us how to absorb that energy. And that's a key component behind taking a hit. If I can take a hit and absorb that energy a little bit more effectively, I can reuse it effectively, I'm probably less likely to get concussions. Okay, so it's also a safety issue here. But the reason why I still want to use a snatch over a clean is because a lot of linemen struggle with mobility through their wrists, their tricep, and into their shoulder. A snatch, it's a little bit easier for linemen to get overhead, and then they just gotta learn how to be confident dropping down into the hole. So start with some power snatches, pause below the knee, power snatches, and then you can go into pause below the knee, power snatch, into some overhead squats, and then progress into that full snatch. If your offensive lineman can get into a full snatch position and they're explosive from the pause and they're strong off the floor, they're gonna have better hip mobility, they're gonna be way more explosive because a snatch is a really rapid contraction-based movement. They're gonna learn how to execute muscular actions at a higher rate, and that's going to help them make quicker contact and dominate their opponents inside the trenches. So if you need help with your football-based strength training, click on the link down below, head over to GarageStrength.com, and you can pick up one of our football programs specifically designed for linemen. And if you need more content around lineman-based training or football-based training, click on this card right here. Until next time, guys, peace.